This podcast is part of the Deluxe Edition Network. To find other great shows on the network, head over to deluxeeditionnetwork.com. That's deluxeeditionnetwork.com.
Coffee-fueled stories. Hello. It's me, Michelle, your host and pocket DJ of Coffee Fueled Stories, a show where storytelling and coffee hang out. This week's special guest is Royce Buckingham. Hello, welcome to the show, Royce.
Hi, Michelle.
I love it. You and I are both prepared. So you're wearing your Reed shirt, nice and bright colored. And I am wearing, so your book is called Monster Lawyer. And so hopefully you can see my shirt. It says Monsters Are Good. And then it has, it's basically kind of a ripoff of the Ramones cover, but Monsters Are Good. So we're going to talk about your awesome Monsters Are Good Monster Lawyer book.
All right. I'm excited.
Your characters are hilarious. So here, this would be like my quick take on it.
Sure.
Delightfully disgusting at times, laugh out loud, smart. Like I thoroughly, like I have been waiting to talk with you about this. I was in the shower getting ready and I was so excited. And all I kept thinking about was your book. It is so delightful and funny and witty and intelligent and sometimes a little bit gruesome.
Yeah, gosh, I hope so. I hope I'm all of those things. That was sort of it's a bit of a mashup. So it's funny and it's a legal thriller and it's a horror novel and it's urban fantasy and it's all me. I've done all of those things in my writing career, and so it's kind of right in my wheelhouse. So I'm super glad that you liked it.
So are there going to be more? Do you anticipate having more? Like, is this going to be like a series, maybe?
So I'm writing book 3 right now. We just my agent just made a deal with Random House in Germany, and we're doing the 3rd novel, and it's going to be Love, Lawyers, and Monsters is the subtitle. So Monster Lawyer 3, Love, Lawyers, and Monsters.
Awesome. That is so exciting. So how long did it take you to write this book? So this is a 2-part question. How long did it take you to write this particular book? And when did you come up with the idea for this story?
So it takes me about a year to write a book, typically when I'm working full time. I just retired from 30 years of being an attorney for the county. So I have more time now, and I've scheduled 6 months for the current book. This idea came to me, I'm going to say 5 years ago or so. I was thinking, what do I want to write next? And I have a pretty good editor in Germany who kind of lets me do what I want. And he said, okay, the big medieval fantasies you've been doing aren't selling as much anymore. What would you like to do next? And I thought, what is exactly me? What is the most relevant thing that I could do? And I said, I write about lawyers, or I am a lawyer and I write about monsters. Voila. Duh. That's it. It's got to be a lawyer that represents monsters. So
that is awesome. So without giving anything away, because I really, one of the things I pride the show on is not giving away spoilers.
Okay.
But we can talk offline. Because there's a couple things that I do want to talk about your characters. I love the characters that you created. And as I was starting into the book, your receptionist, Miriam, and then of course Phil, the intern. But so hopefully this doesn't give anything away. The title, so I was thinking you're talking about, going up the elevator and you're going into this law firm. And so I was like, are the monsters lawyers? Like, where are we going with this story, right? You never know where you're going as a reader. And then as you continue through the story. But I was thinking, like, my brain just went into like this kind of childlike wonder about lawyers, the rhino, like I was thinking he was the rhino. And so it was kind of refreshing to see that it wasn't that, like once I actually got into the story. But your prose, the way that the way that you built the characters, I was like trying to imagine, okay, is Miriam like not a lizard, but you know what I mean? Like a
Mhm.
little bit of Monsters Inc., but not, because
Right.
I wanted you to take me into the story. But it was really kind of cute, like kind of the way you set it up, and then how you like take you into the characters, and that like I just like I said, it's delightful. Like it is a delightful, somewhat disturbing, but so, and laugh out loud. I literally laughed out loud. I couldn't even tell you how many times I laughed out loud. So I just want to say I really, really, really enjoyed this story, and I hope to read many, many, many more of this particular story.
Well, thanks. I was talking to my Hollywood agent. I have a guy down there that when I take books to Hollywood, he runs them around, and he said he gave this to his assistant. He said, "Here, read this and tell me if we should do anything with it." And he said the reason he knew it was good is because he could hear his assistant laughing as he was reading it in the back room. And he's like, "What are you laughing at? What is it good?" And so yeah, it's just kind of funny. These things strike me as funny. When you put normal people in bizarre situations, that's one of my favorite things to do in writing.
Were any of the cases that you've done in your 30-year career, did you use anything from your past to reference some of the cases that you have in here? Obviously, without the the
Yeah.
supernatural ones, but
Yes, yes, always. The Sometimes it's the legal issues only. Sometimes it's somebody else's case that I know about. I can say that there's a very famous case in Seattle called the Ride the Ducks case, where the Ride the Ducks bus has a crash and people die. It's horrible. But that is in the story. It just for a snippet. But I reference things like that because it helps me keep it real, instead of making it up. So it feels authentic when you have things that actually happened. And truth can be stranger than fiction, but it just has that air of authenticity. It's like, oh yeah, I know that stretch of highway where that accident occurred. And when you name it and say that happened on the floating bridge, and then everybody says, "Oh yeah, I know that," and that grounds it in reality. And even though you're talking about monsters, people are like, "Oh, I can suspend my disbelief and feel like it's real in this universe, even if it's not real for real." If that makes sense.
it totally does. And that relates to the next thing that I thought was really cool that you did. You give some Seattle history. And I don't know much about Seattle. I've only been to Seattle twice as a tourist. I don't live there. And so when you reference these places and these locations, so you reference Pioneer Square, I'm like, oh, I was there. I was there. I know exactly where he's talking about. But you give some history, and of course, the Space Needle. The Space Needle is freaking awesome.
Mhm.
So, do you remember the first time you went to the Space Needle? Have you noticed how Coffee Fueled Stories doesn't have any ads? That's because I work tirelessly to keep this show alive. After 3 years on my own, I've decided I need to ask for your help. I've never asked anyone to subscribe. I've never asked anyone to leave a review. I've never asked anyone to rate the show. And I've never asked anyone to pay to listen. There are a few ways you can help support the show. I've created a Patreon page, Coffee Fueled Stories, and a subscription section on my podcast website. It's simple to support and help me keep my dream alive. Just click the link in the show notes to set up your paid subscription option. It's that easy. Thank you for your support.
I do, because they have a restaurant that goes in a circle, and I remember eating there as a little kid, and I was amazed that the restaurant turned around. You know, that's that was my big memory. And I've been back there recently, and now they have the glass floor, which is amazing. You can walk on the glass floor and look down.
That's
It's
so
really,
crazy. Yeah, I
yeah.
was gonna say that I've only been to the Space Needle once, and that wasn't there. And so when you were describing, I was like, holy crap, I don't know if I can do that.
It's scary. Yeah.
That's oh my God, that's so cool. I think we can talk about that. So you tell me if this is a spoiler or not.
Okay.
You have the fear monster and the pain monster.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, so I'll use this example. When I was watching The Walking Dead for the very first time, not knowing what to expect, I felt like I spent a lot of the time behind my pillow watching it, like holding the pillow and like, peeking my head up, like, is it okay? But it wasn't the zombies that scared me. It was the anticipation of what was going to be happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, so I can handle gore. Like if the monster, whatever horror, Jason comes out and just starts slashing things, I'm like, oh yeah, it's fine, no big deal. But the anticipation of that, that's why I'm hiding behind the pillow. And so I really like that you have the distinction of the fear monster versus the pain monster.
Right.
Like, how did you come up with that concept?
Well, when I was a kid, I guess I would have been about 8 when Jaws came out, and it was, I don't know if you know this, but it came out as PG. It was not more because there wasn't a ton of gore, and there was no sex, or there wasn't a lot of language that was terrible, and there were no drugs, and so it comes out and it's PG because they really didn't have an R-rated category for suspense or just friggin' terrifying, And so they had all those problems with the shark, and so they shot the movie. They had a huge mechanical shark, but it wasn't working real well. So they shot a lot of the movie just hinting that the shark was there and having the music and stuff. And they figured out, and I figured out at 8 years old, because I went to the movie when I was 8, mistake, that suspense is much scarier than actual violence, than monster violence. And I think I learned that lesson way back then, and so I still use it and try to keep monsters hidden, as much as you can if you really want to scare people. And I think you'll know this example at the end of the book. There's a lights out, period of time, and you're just like, where the is the monster? Where is the bad thing? And
Yeah,
when you're groping in the dark and you don't know where things are, that's scarier than being able to see it coming across the room.
totally. I mean, I'm rational and I don't believe in, the monsters under your bed, but I still try to make sure that I have my feet in the blanket on the bed. Like it's in a closet. My closet is always closed, keep that door closed. The other thing I wanted to ask you is because your characters are just delightful. Like I was thoroughly entertained by every single character that you created. So are any of those based off of like friends? Like did you take a little bit of anybody, or are there pieces of yourself in any of these characters?
We all know a Phil. I mean, there's a Phil in every office, and they're eager and they're like a puppy, like, what can I, I'm ready to help, and what do you want me to do, boss? And so I'm not sure it's a particular person, but it's a person that we all know. Martina, was the favorite character of all the like reviews and fan stuff that I get. Martina was number one in book one, and then in book two, frankly, Phil was like the most popular, or Dennis, who doesn't do much in book one, but he becomes very popular in book two. But yeah, so these are people that would have worked with me, but it's a conglomeration of them. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
nobody is exactly who they are. That receptionist is probably the closest. We had a receptionist who was pretty funny and would cover for you, and and so she's close. The main character is almost always has some of you in them. And so, when you're a writer, and this, you can't help but put yourself into the main character, even if you don't know you're doing it. And
Totally.
then when people were saying your main character's a jerk, I was like, ouch. That's It's kind of me.
Well, see, I the way I looked at the main character, he and not you, this is not direct. He had little bits of everything. So, like I said, this is why I find this book absolutely delightful. There's cussing in it, there's a little bit of gore, there's monsters, there's real life stuff, there's a little bit of historical, places, like you were saying. It has a little bit of everything, but it's not like a menu where if you like go to a restaurant and you see the menu is 20 pages with the exception of Cheesecake Factory, you know it's a place you don't want to necessarily eat at, right? But your book had so many different elements and they all just fit perfectly. Just it was like I have the only word I have is just absolutely like delightful. Literally all morning I just kept thinking, this is a delightful book. I can't wait to read more. I want to read more, even though there was some cussing and there was some laugh out loud, bad behavior, human behavior and monster behavior. But it makes you feel good. And like I can totally relate to the guy laughing in the other room. I can relate to that. It had everything.
It's interesting because we're out in Germany with this, and we're trying to bring it to the United States, and we're currently, we're out at like 20 publishers, and we're starting to collect the rejections and requests, and people have trouble figuring out where to stick it, what genre is it, and I'm like, well, it's a mashup, so maybe we could get everybody. But that's not always how editors think. They're like, who is the audience for this? And I'm like, I don't know. Everyone, some of each.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. It is. Yes, I couldn't agree with that more because, and that's the other thing, and maybe we can go down this alley. Why should it have to be just one thing? You have psychological terror, you have psychological horror, there's splatter punk. I mean, there's so many different kind of categories of horror if you think about it. Why does the book a book can be multifaceted? It doesn't have to be just one thing.
yeah,
Like,
I I think so. I would love to see it be a crossover and sell 1 million copies is my dream. But yeah, I when people ask what it is, I think, well, I think it's urban fantasy mostly, but it's got all those other elements. So I don't know, we may end up with a small press that, thinks more outside the box. But I'm not sure where we'll land in the US. I'm going to StokerCon. I'll talk to some people. My agent's got it out. But in Germany, we've gotten great reviews. People love it like you do. And they mostly love those secondary characters, and they hate me. They hate the lawyer.
no, and I think he's great. He's flawed. He's human and he's flawed, but he's also redeemable.
Mhm.
And that's I'm okay. Example, this morning, flawed with our timing. My computer was not cooperating. Flawed, but redeemable because here we are. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
it's what we've had some really astute. My agent especially, she read it and she wrote me and said, well, when I was actually this is the book I got her with because she's a new agent for me, and uh, she said that she liked the book because she was just laughing out loud and she thought it was really funny. But she really got what the main character was doing. He starts in a place and he has a character arc and becomes something else. But I did get a lot of people who said, your character's a jerk. I don't like him. And I'm like, well, A, he's a lawyer. So we start there. But B, I've put him in a place where he can have some movement with his development.
I don't think a lawyer like and we kind of talked offline. Like my late wife was a lawyer, corporate lawyer. And I mean, we need lawyers. We need it would be like saying your horrible elementary school teacher is a representation of all elementary school teachers. Well, that's not true. I loved a one and I didn't like another. Like we're human, we're different, and I thought, like I said, from the opening line where he's, talking about the tie, that his tie and the clothes that he's wearing. And we talked about this, like being part of it is, so this example, my late wife was a corporate lawyer and she drove a Honda. And she's like, do you know how much shit I'm going to get for driving a Honda as a corporate lawyer? I should be in a baby BMW. And then next year I should be in another one and another. Like, there's like this expectation. And then I said, you know what? I love that you're in a Honda because that means it's practical. That means you have your head screwed on. You've got a lot of student debt and you're trying to pay off things and you're being practical. Like, that to me is intelligent.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, there's a whole variety of lawyers. I've worked with them my whole life. They do tend to analyze things a certain way. They think like a lawyer is what they used to say in law school, and maybe you've heard that before. They teach you to think like a lawyer, and emotional people who think about people's feelings don't think like lawyers. They think with their heart, and lawyers are like, no, fuck, excuse me.
Yes, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Heck with my heart. I'm thinking with my brain right now. And they're like, yeah, but this is a really emotional situation. No, but I'm still thinking with my brain. You know, it's so we come off as being cold, indifferent. Maybe we have an agenda. We have, we want to get to a point B, and we're not slowing down for anyone while we get there. And, makes you not so likable sometimes.
But at the same time, you want someone who is going to remove their emotions and actually, like you said, the facts. I love that your guy, your main character, all he wants is the facts. And that's absolutely what you want, the facts. It's law. Law isn't about emotions. It's about the facts, and it's, can you argue them and can you present a case, that's going to win, because nobody wants to lose, right? Like, if you're in court, you want to win. From that perspective, like I said, I don't think he was a jerk. I loved your main character. Like I said, did he screw up? Did he have some mess ups? Yes, but don't we all? But at the end of the day, he just wants to get to the facts. He wants to win his cases. And, and then at the end, without giving anything away, absolutely loved the ending. Just truly lovely. Loved it. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, yay, I was rooting for everybody, and like I said, Phil, who doesn't, the best example was, like you said, he is the puppy, because sometimes I could see it, like the very first time I had, my first job, I felt very much like Phil. Like, what do you want me to do? I'll do it. I'm on. Or as soon as my boss would say something, literally the words out of my mouth, on it.
Yeah.
And there I went. So, but I don't think lawyers are bad. Like, I know lawyers get a bad rap. You could say the same thing about, I don't know, accountants. Like, accountants have no personality. And I am not saying that. I've heard that. I am not, I'm just saying everybody, and who wants to talk to, writers, right? Horror writers, who wants to listen to people talk about killing people?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's true. There are stereotypes, and stereotypes aren't always accurate, but there are stereotypes for a reason, because there are some consistent behaviors in these professions that, are just part of the profession. So, so for
totally.
those people that hated my guy, and all the Germans that hated my guy, sorry. He's just doing his job. So,
I thought he was great. I like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then let's talk about some coffee, caffeine, writing juice. I like to call it writing juice. So one of my favorite lines that you have, and it's right at the very beginning, that first hit of caffeine radiates through me. I was like, I love this guy. That was like in page 3. What? Go ahead. No, please.
When I drive, I have a screenwriting group that I do in Seattle, and I'm about an hour and a half north. So I have to drive to that, and then I come home at like 10 at night. And so I have to have caffeine to drive home so I don't get sleepy at the wheel. And I'll take my current caffeine. It would be like a Diet Pepsi, which I hate, but it has caffeine. So I drink that, and I'm like, I'm going along, and all of a sudden my finger's tapping and the song is on, and then suddenly I'm singing, and pretty soon I'm like singing full bore with the song, and then the caffeine just like, grows in you like a thing. So.
I love it. I love it. So you had a very large mug there. You and I are
Oh,
both drinking. What have you got in that mug right now?
so this is tea. So I do tea. I do decaf so that I don't get addicted to caffeine. But on days when I need caffeine, not, so I don't need it all the time, but once in a while I'll be like, okay, today I need it,
That
and
makes sense. And that's why you're able to tap along and sing along because you actually aren't, it's not flowing through you 24/7.
that's right.
Well, that
Yeah.
makes sense. That
My
makes sense.
tolerance is very low. So when I have caffeine,
Oh my goodness.
uh,
And I love that, you reference it several times in there. You reference tea. So that's what I had a feeling. I was like, I think he's probably a tea drinker.
you guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And then of course, Phil, you make a point that he's a barista as well. And it is Seattle. And I just, like I said, I was like, oh my God. I was like, again, love the characters, enjoyed how you made a point to, because who isn't a barista in Seattle, right?
That's your second job for, any artist or any, yeah. Yeah. Phil, I had to revise this. I think you got the revised version, but um he, Daniel, the lawyer, was trying to dissuade Phil from being an attorney because he's like, you're a nice kid. Why would you want to have a life of conflict? So he's trying to dissuade him. And in the version that went out in Germany, Daniel is actually really mean to Phil. He says, we're never going to hire you. You should go do something different. You should serve coffee. And he says, I do serve coffee, and I've toned that down because it was part of the, your guy's a jerk reviews that I got. But he was really on Phil about don't be a lawyer. I don't recommend it.
Like you said, and serve coffee. But
Yeah.
you have to admit, people who want their coffee, I'm sure can probably be pretty cranky if they don't get their coffee their way. Like, I wouldn't want to be a barista in Seattle. No
It's a
way.
yeah, it's a thing. Yeah.
No way. No, yeah, that's just something that, no. Here, fuck spiders. Straight up, I feel the same way about spiders that I do as I would not want to be a barista in Seattle. And I don't like spiders and I don't like snakes. And I love that you put that in there. And that was, again, laugh out loud. Like you just would catch me off guard. Like you're just telling the story. And then all of a sudden you just kind of throw a zinger in there. And I'm like, oh my God. I was like, this is awesome. Like, how many edits did this have to go through? Like, was it kind of seamless or did you have to do like 5, 20 different edits?
So this is how I write. I write chapter one, and then when I get stuck, I go back and edit. So I'll write chapter one, and I'm halfway through chapter two, and I get stuck. So I go back and I'll rewrite chapter one and half of chapter two, and then I'll finish chapter two, and then I'll go back and rewrite one and two, and get into three. And by the time I get done with the book, I'm done because I've rewritten all of those early chapters over and over and over. And probably the weakest part of my novels generally is the last few chapters because I'm on deadline and usually I don't get to rewrite those a bunch of times. But the beginnings of books get rewritten a ton of times. And like I think the place where I think you're going is how do you make it fun and funny and hit those lines? And it's just when you go back and reread it, you have to give yourself, as a writer, I'm sure you know this, but you give yourself a little time away. And then when you come back and read it again, you're like, that word is funnier, oh, that's what goes there. Or the natural thing for Phil to say isn't this, it would be this, and then you get the funny stuff on the edits. And like I said, that usually happens when I'm not inspired to do new stuff, but I'm just doing work.
That makes sense. And I mean, gosh, talk about how efficient is that if you think about it? Because as opposed to having to edit the whole book at one time, you go back and I mean that is like, so SOPs is, I love SOPs. That's what I wrote. That was my job, technical writer. Some people hate SOPs. They called me SOP lady and the SOP police. So I get it. I was hated where I worked too. I was loved by some and hated by some, and that's okay. So, but where I'm going with this is, damn, that's efficient. Like, that is super efficient. I I think you're the only one that I've ever heard that does that. Like, holy crap, like that's like, good Lord, that's awesome.
It keeps you from getting through with the one draft and then having to, be at a weird dead end and redo everything. You just sort of, you're just inching your way there, and it keeps you on track, really. There are people, obviously, writers do it different ways. And one of the things that I've never been able to do is just spill a whole novel out and then, just barf it out and then look at it and see how it looks. Boy, I could never do that. And I was working full time as a lawyer and 2 kids, and we were running. My wife and I were running half marathons. She ran marathons, and so I was super busy. So it had to, I couldn't afford to write a book, have it due, and have to rewrite the whole book. That's a no.
That totally makes sense. So, Royce, I have a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
You have the word blather in there a couple of times. And one of my favorite words is blather's kite. And blather is just a fun word. So do you have any favorite words that you absolutely love to stick in your books?
Oh my goodness. Specific words, no, but I like to use words that are dated in a funny way. So things from my childhood that, or sayings that old people use. I love stuff like that. I don't do it a lot, but once in a while I'll have Daniel do something that's about 20 years out of date, just to show that he's old. And blather would be that sort of word. I don't know if he says it or I just say it in a context where it sounds like it's about him. But that's what I really like to do, is stick in some old stuff. And some people get it and some people don't, and I write it for the few people that are going to get it. And I just enjoy that there are 10 people out there that are going to say, oh, that's from Happy Days, or, oh, I love that. I remember when, that movie came out in the 70s.
I'm going to say, because I have a feeling we're about the same age. And I felt I could really relate to Daniel because I too sometimes feel a little out of date. Gen X and all, but you know what? It's all good. I appreciate it. So count me as one. I'll make me 11. I'm number 11. You mentioned agent. How did you? I don't know anything, and I don't think I've ever talked about agents. How do people get agents? I don't know if that's like a whole topic all of itself, but can you kind of walk us through the process of like, how did you go about getting an agent?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's a great mystery for all writers, especially when you're starting out. And so it was different when I started. The way that you got attention in screenwriting, which is what I was doing, was you entered competitions. And so I had entered the Nickel Fellowship, which is put on by the Academy that does the Academy Awards, and they get a gazillion entries. And I got into the top 50, I think. And so there was an agency down there. They get a list of those 50 writers and the screenplays they wrote. And so they go down. The guy was a horror guy. So he went down the list and he just highlighted the 7 horror scripts on that list of 50, unknown writers that had done well in that competition. And I was one of them. And he said, bring us your thing. And so I sent him Demon Keeper, which was my first novel. And Demon Keeper had not sold as a screenplay. So I kind of gave up and I wrote it as a novel. And so I had a novel and a screenplay. And these folks were looking at my screenplay and I said, do you care that I wrote that as a novel? Does that help? And they said, oh, good God, yes, it's easier to sell novels, which is relative because it's super hard to sell a novel, but it's easier to sell a novel than a movie to 20th Century Fox. Right. So they take the novel and they said, we're going to take this to New York and we'll sell it. And then when we sell this in New York as a novel, we'll have a better chance of selling the screenplay. And I'm just like, yeah, I've been doing this for 13 years. I've never sold anything. So, good good luck. I'm glad to have an agent. This is exciting, but you know, and a couple of weeks later we sold the novel. A couple of weeks after that, we sold the movie. And so it was this overnight sort of just overnight after 13 years, just boom. And it happened because I was in that competition. What I've learned since then, and the world has changed. So now we have the internet. I used to send things out snail mail because this was the 90s. But now you're online with everything. But in the same way that, sending out snail mail is really impersonal. If you send things out online, you really don't get a lot of attention. And so I find if you go to conferences and things and meet people in person, and they see that you're serious and they meet you and you're not crazy and then they'll read your stuff and they'll actually pay attention. And so the last conference that I went to was the Pacific Northwest Writers Association conference. And I went there specifically to meet agents because I had let my last agent go. So I was looking for a new agent. And so I went there in person, and you get to talk to like two agents for 2 minutes. It's stupid, right? You get like an appointment. So basically you're trying to talk to them in the hallway. And, if they're hanging out in the hallway chatting with people, then they're making themselves available to be talked to. If they're hurrying by looking down, they're not. So you look for people hanging out in the hallway, and I had my targeted 3 or 4 agents that I saw descriptions of, and they do the thing that I do. So I was watching for them hanging out in the halls. I went and talked to one of them. He said, "Oh, your book in Germany sounds terrific. I'll get you attached to one of my associate agents." He was the head of the agency. It's the Rights Factory in Canada, and he's the head of the agency. And he says, "You sound terrific. I'm going to send your book to my gal." And he did. She was the one that laughed a lot. She took me on, and that's how I got my agent. So long story short, go meet people in person. You have to do the work. You have to be a good writer. You have to have some stuff done, ready to show them. But go meet them in person and be a normal person that they like, and they will give you a real read. I looked for an agent. I had an offer on the table in Germany from Random House, and I looked for an agent for like, I don't know, 9 months and got nothing. And I was like, I have an offer. You just sign it, you get money. And the agents were still like, it's online. They get a million queries. I was getting polite rejections. Some would say, "Oh, I see you've written a bunch of books. You're a professional," but no. But I meet one person in person, and suddenly I have an agent. So that's my advice. Go meet people in person. You do have to, like I said, you do have to do the work. You have to have your stuff ready to go. You have to have sort of an elevator pitch for them. I guess I'll stop there.
No, that makes sense. Thank you very much. Like I said, it's a question that I've been meaning to ask for a long time, but I've never actually asked it, and so thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And then the final question is going to be, you are a member of the HWA Seattle chapter. When did you join, and what drew you to horror? Or was that, are you going to answer with the Jaws? Go back to the Jaws.
Well, I've been writing fantasy for so long, and one day I thought, Monster Lawyer is not exactly fantasy. It could be horror. I love horror. I've always been in the fantasy world. I was a member of the children's book writing, the SCBWI, because I wrote children's monster stories, fantasy. I thought, horror, those are my people. Why am I not part of the, horror world? So I actually went to StokerCon last year just to check it out. And I was like, wow, this is everybody that likes the same stuff I do. And then when I got back, I joined HWA. I was like, I'm in,
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for answering my questions. And again, I apologize for those horrible technical issues. I'm glad we got it all worked out.
Yeah, it was
and
fun.
Everything got saved. So thank you so much. And like I said, I really, really, really truly enjoyed your book. It was like I just can't stop thinking about the characters and the silliness and the horror, some of the graphic. So I'm actually before I stop and talk some more offline, would you please do the honor of saying my tagline, "Go forth and be magical."
Go forth and be magical.